Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start this. It looks like the microphone is working today. Sorry about the glitch on Tuesday. I don't know what was going on, but the microphone simply wasn't being cooperative. um, I'm going ahead and starting for the simple reason that I knew you were going to have a change of schedule this week. And I don't know if you're going to be able to make it on time. If you come in late, that's fine. We'll rewind part of this. Meanwhile, this week's topics. I'm sorry, as I say, I'm sorry about the glitch last on Tuesday, but this week's topics are sections 6 and 7 of the book, chapters 16 through 19 on emergency preparedness, and chapter 2 on security management. These have fallen under the purview of facilities manager for the simple reason, I think in most cases, nobody knew where else to put it. So it has actually fallen on this, and many of these facility managers go through training and learn a lot about these particular concepts. The issue with both is planning. Security is a matter of planning. It's also a matter of execution. We have all sorts of technologies that people make use of in looking at setting up security systems, but you also have to have people who are well trained in those areas and able to carry out the duties efficiently. The issue for most people is that security to many of your employees is simply a pain in the neck. You're going through and having to push buttons to get into buildings, having to go through scanning equipment, even in emergency rooms in the hospital, you end up with doing that, and it can be a real pain. However, we've had too many incidents where the value of this has been demonstrated. The issue, the goal really is safety of not just your employees, but safety of your visitors, your customers, etc. And even state agencies like WYDOT have customers. It's just a matter of definition. But what we want to do is look at this, look at the whole concept of security as in a holistic way. Security can't be so tight that it makes it impossible for both employees and for the customers to actually come into the facility. But it can't be so loose that we are at risk of having unpleasant things happen. So it's a balance. We see this a lot, and it's a balance that needs to be understood and accepted by all, because it's really there not to make things hard, but to make sure that people remain safe. Unfortunately, in our society, you talked the other day when we were talking about sustainability. You talked about the fact that the port of entry keeps its lights on all the time, which you think is a pain in the neck, and I agree. It's a waste of resources. However, the excuse is that they don't want people breaking in. Will lights prevent people from breaking in? No. But lights do provide for security. And they do provide a measure of safety in that if people see the lights on and they know that there is actually a recording a recording security system, that they're likely to end up being caught. Now there are other ways to handle that, of course. You can have automatic systems where any attempted entry by someone automatically turns on lights, even if they are authorized to come into the building, if they know all the codes. If all of these things happen, then we can save resources. And when the lights come on, people with bad intent are likely to disappear. So it really is something to consider. Security systems need planned well. They need to make sense. They can't just be, okay, we have a security system and here's the steps you have to go through. It needs to make sense, and it needs to have a reason, and it needs to be appropriate for the facility. At College America, we have doors that lock at about 7 o'clock at night, I believe, is when they get locked up, maybe 7:30, maybe after the first break and after the person on the front desk is gone. And in order to leave the building, we have to set the alarm, and we have a code for that. That code is only given to people who need to know it. That's one form of security implementation. We have doors that are locked elsewhere. We have doors that are alarmed. If someone attempts to leave through a door that's alarmed, we know that that door has been opened, and we know that somebody is exiting the building. People coming in, we are a public institution, even though it's a school. So we have to allow people in, and we have to be ready. We also have other arrangements to call for emergency personnel if we need them. So these things need to be planned. Your port of entry is not the CIA, and so we don't need the same kind of security as an organization like that is likely to have. The other part of this is again, a well-defined purpose. And when you are educating your staff about these procedures, that purpose needs to be front and center. It's not there because everybody does it. It's there for a reason. So we do that planning. And every facility is going to have its own plan. There are some general things that people will normally do. We use monitoring systems. Security systems now are cheap. You can even YDOT can go to Costco and buy a security system. They're not that expensive. I have no idea. Partly our system was put in place by students working with Paul to set this up and learn about putting these things in place. I have a nephew who works for the Navy Federal Credit Union, and he installs security systems at their many locations around the country and indeed around the world. And as a result, he's installing these things and testing them. So it's really common to see these things, and they're fairly, as I say, they're fairly inexpensive. But you do need to know what you're doing. You can't, I would not go buy one and just try to install it right out of the box without studying what to do if I wanted to put a system in my home. But planning and education of your staff to get that staff buy-in. Security is only as good as your employees help it be. I have seen places where employees, it's a pain in the neck and they want to go out and smoke a cigarette. So rather than closing the door and then having to use a key code to get in, or have somebody let them in, they'll block the door open. That's an invitation to trouble. And we caution against that quite a bit. But the real issue is that security is really everybody's business, because everyone benefits. Everyone gets to pay the small price for these things, and everyone benefits from the protection that they offer. All right. Emergency preparedness is a different issue. You can't define what emergency is coming. They range everything from you know, from a fire in the building. We all have fire drills. We used to have them all the time when I was in school. But fires in the building are one thing. To injuries, you had to deal with that with the guy whose tire blew up in his face. You got to deal with that. That's an emergency. You guys were trained in first aid and other life-saving techniques, and so he survived that incident, which is great. But it is but it's part of being prepared for an emergency. An emergency, by definition, is unpredictable. It can range from an earthquake. If you were living in California, you'd be prepared for such things. A number of years ago, there was a major earthquake in the San Francisco area, and a number of friends of mine, colleagues, professional colleagues of mine, were working in companies out there and told me some pretty interesting stories about what happened in that earthquake. Quite frankly, there are disasters that are big enough that emergency preparedness is useful for a very narrow range of things you can do. An earthquake is one of those things that we have our plans, but we never know how severe they're going to be, if they're going to occur at all, and the kind of damage that will result. It's difficult to do more than have generalized plans for evacuation and rescue. But what happens in a major disaster when even the emergency personnel cannot get in to help? And that is a major consideration that most people who are involved in emergency planning have to deal with. So on the local level, we deal with the things that are that can be handled. Fire in the facility, we have a plan for evacuation, and we have people that understand what that plan is. At a place like College America, all of us on the faculty know how we can get our students and ourselves out of the building if there is a need to evacuate the facility. And there are people who are supposed to go through and make certain that as certain as possible that everyone has gotten safely out. But it becomes, again, a group effort. For us in the classroom, we have the responsibility for our students, getting them out by the safest possible route, which means you have to, when something like this occurs, people have to be trained how to assess the threat and the danger, and to choose the correct action to take. In this case, if we're talking about a fire, we need to know where it is and how to get our students out an exit that is not that is available. And we have plenty of them, plenty of ways out, we hope, for almost any kind of such incident. Another aspect, of course, these days we hear about active shooters. Everybody goes through active shooter drills. We've had them at the school, and active shooter training. Again, it's understanding where you are and how you get your students out of the building safely and away from an incident like that. These are very, very difficult. We've also been trained in bleeding control and basic rescue operations that can be used for such types of injuries. Those are there, but there are others as well. There can be flooding. Even though we are not in a generally considered a flood zone, all we have to do is think back to 2013 when the city of Loveland was cut off from the world for several days because every road into the place was inundated. Into and out of the place was inundated. So these things can occur. And so inside your building, what are our plans? How do we, if there's a problem overnight in the building, how do we contact our students and staff to say, don't come in? That's part of emergency preparedness. Having speed dialing for emergency personnel. We have that. Everyone should understand it and everyone should make use of it. But the plan itself means that we need to go through and look at what the potential threats are. Should we plan for an earthquake in Fort Collins? Well, probably earthquake is not going to be high on our list of potential natural disasters here. Tornadoes? It could be. They're moving closer and closer to the mountains. Our location at the school is close enough to the mountains that we don't worry about tornadoes, but with the changing weather patterns, we don't know that that's going to continue. There have been incidents of tornadoes in the mountains. So is it possible? Yeah. Are we worried about it? Not in our part of Fort Collins. However, head out toward I-25 and remember the big tornado a few years ago in Windsor, and you understand that these things can come in close and they can be big and disastrous. If we look at a recent disaster here, weather disaster, the tornadoes in Alabama and Georgia that killed a lot of people this last week are a good example of a place where we know that those areas do get tornadoes. And so there are plans in place with emergency personnel. But again, we have to have the personnel available. They need to be trained. And as a result, what you want to do is in your facility is really set up the plans themselves and look at the various threat assessments, develop those plans, and then train people. There needs to be a command and control mechanism. For instance, let's just talk about something trivial, a weather closure at College America. We, the instructors, do not get to make that decision. That's made at the level of Joel. And then when that decision is made, there is a mechanism in place for alerting staff and students that we are either not opening or opening late and getting that word out. So the command and control function is there as well. In the case of an actual emergency, chaos is not uncommon. This is why we practice. This is why we have drills and we have training, because we want not to have issues of, and again, this is about command and control in many cases, we want to have issues of who's in charge, what are the rules. Again, and it can be layered. At school, we have overall charge falls to the senior management on campus, Joel and the deans and Christy McNear. Amanda Swift and Christy Bankston are also in that loop. But on the individual classroom level, command and control falls to the instructor, who has to make a judgment about where do we go, how do we get out if we have to, how do we protect ourselves. And so, again, what we have is that command, control, and communication. What we want to do is limit the need for immediate communication during an emergency, because that can really just get in the way. But communication is necessary. There needs to be a way, for instance, if we get out of the building, let's just say I have a class of 5 students back in LC5, and there's a fire in the hallway. There is a door at the end of that hallway that we would go out, at which point I would get a message somehow, probably by text, to other people that I had my class safely out of the building. Because again, we have the responsibility of making certain that we are, that everyone is safe. The training, but also what happens afterwards. Let's just say we have a fire. Do we have a plan for continuing somehow operations in the aftermath of a fire? The answer is that, again, it depends on the extent of the fire. If there's a fire back in the computing equipment that we have set up in LC5, the issue may be that we have lost one classroom, so we have to, reassign things. We've also lost a lot of equipment. In a facility, do we have enough supplies if we have an emergency that people basically are unable to get out? Do we have supplies for them? Water, food, maybe. Something for people to survive on for a couple of days if necessary. For our own personal lives, the Mormons have the right idea, have a half a year's worth of food in the house, just in case. I personally think a half a year may be a bit extreme, but they had some pretty rough times when they were moving out to Utah. So maybe not a bad idea. It certainly has prompted, we're not Mormons, but it certainly has prompted us to do things at our house, like have a stash of water, enough to get along for a number of days if we need to. Basic water supplies for drinking and food prep. Do we have other means of cooking? Yes, we do. We can manage. It may not be the best, but we can still do it. So this is part of it. In a healthcare facility, we have special problems to deal with. Patients are often not mobile, so we need to be sure that we always have sufficient staff on board that in an emergency, we can safely evacuate our patients if need be. We need to have supplies if we're cut off. Say we've had some flooding, as we did in 2013. We have some flooding. Do we have sufficient supplies of food, of drugs, of medical supplies? Do we have a backup electrical system in these cases? How do we get our personnel in? I remember reading stories about hospitals in the upper Midwest when there'd be blizzards and there'd be, feet of snow on the ground, sending out snowmobiles to pick up their medical staff, bring them in, because we have to take care of our patients, and we need a certain level of staff to do so. And hospitals simply cannot close because of it's inconvenient for people to get in. So emergency preparedness in a medical situation is complicated by the fact that we have potentially a group of people who are not mobile and who need life-saving drugs and equipment. And we cannot afford to lose those. And it does. These things can occur. Natural disasters. Look at what happened in the California fires. Look what happened in the hurricanes that we've had in the last few years that have devastated not just the Caribbean but the U.S. Southern states. And again, the wildfires out in California, where literally the fires themselves exceeded all of the planning measures because of the rapidity with which they spread. But again, people need to be prepared and willing to cooperate. Personally, if we had a fire plan, if I lived in an area that was fire prone, I would literally be prepared to just forget everything. Forget everything except getting me and my family out safely. Some people couldn't do that, and when it's something that's big enough, there will be casualties. But without any sort of evacuation plan, the casualties in those California fires last year would have been much, much, much higher. All of those homes and everything and all of those possessions are replaceable. Lives, unfortunately, are not replaceable, and we can't store them. So that really is part of it. The response to these things, we also have to work with response personnel, and then we have to have a plan for recovery. Recovery basically means how do we get the place back in operation after some sort of emergency. Let's just say we have a fire. How do you get the place back up and running again afterwards, assuming it hasn't been 100% destroyed? Then that's a different set of plans as well. But let's just look at something like an incident of, say, an active shooter. We do have several different levels of preparation for recovery, and those levels include psychological counseling for the people who have experienced that trauma. So are we prepared for that? The video about the Boston Marathon is a good example. The guy was talking about the fact that even weeks later, people were still traumatized by what they had to see and what they had to go through. So a recovery plan and a follow-up plan are necessary. We have always forgotten that the people who are dealing with these emergencies often need help dealing with the fallout and the what happens afterwards and what they've experienced. So there's all of those things. Right now you're behind on your assignments. Please, you need to catch up. We have only 1 week left. A week from today, we will have our final meeting, and I would like to do that, but we've got discussions this week and next. The readings next week are out of section and maintenance of facilities. So let's just take a quick look at next week's discussion here. You're looking at the prompt here. The discussion forum is to looking at what we've talked about: building design, layout, emergency preparedness, sustainability, and so forth. How those support this patient flow in our healthcare facilities. And you may want to do some research on that topic. And the assignment for next week, besides to read the chapters, your assignment is a little bit different as well. You're looking at the specific and unique operational issues involved in healthcare. You take a look at that particular topic. In your case, you're interested in long-term care facilities. They do have their special problems because many of the patients in those facilities are immobile. They cannot get up and walk out of the building. They're either immobile or only partially mobile. So how do we handle these things? So let's look at all of those things. You need to do the assignment 2s from each week, which is, a brief discussion of what you learn in each of the chapters of the book. We have an assessment this week. Your assessments are going well. And then we have a final assessment at the end. You're staying up on your daily checkpoints, which is good. So I hope you can keep that up. But you do have some catch up to do and some more work to do. I have not seen the discussion. Let's go over here and look at your grades. I have not seen, you have not done your week 2 discussion. That's why there's a 0 there. So you need to catch up on those discussions, and we need those assignment 2s. I thought your week 2 assignment 1 was actually very, very well done and well researched. So keep up that good work as well. Again, your assessments have gone quite well. I expect you'll continue that. Don't forget to do this one as well at the end of the class. So here we are, and I would like to see you, bring your grade up. Right now you are passing, but not as well as I think you should be. So I know you can bring your grade up. So please go ahead and do that. When you take a look at this, I'd like you to send me an email. I can see that the microphone is working. So the email will be that you've watched it and that the code word here is Tokyo, Tokyo, Tokyo. I will talk with you later. Please watch this. I will send you an email and send you the link to this video and post the video in the shell. So I will talk with you soon. And if we need to meet on a different day, I don't know if your schedule changed. I remember you had an email. It looked like your schedule might be changing. And if it's more if it's more advantageous for us to meet on Tuesday of next week rather than Thursday, then let's plan to do that. So I will look forward to hearing from you, and I hope you have a good weekend, and can get caught up.